Hey guys, it's Lizzie. So anyone who ever called me liberal, that will never happen again after this video. Definitely watch the whole video before commenting or assuming what my viewpoint is. I'm not saying I'm for arranged marriages, and I think that when we hear the term arranged marriage, we get triggered because there are a lot of cultures where they marry very young girls to older guys. There's no consent involved at all, and they don't want to be a part of the marriage. And that is not at all what I'm talking about. And this isn't something that I personally am doing or want to do either. This is just sharing, though, what I think the intention of marriage and relationships was supposed to be, and how I think what's going on right now is leading to a lot of brokenness and hurt.
The stars in the sky, I wonder if you're looking at them too. I know you're out there, I can't wait till I find you.
We always view choice as a good thing, and we see freedom in terms of how many choices we can make and having our own volition in making decisions. But there's two different types of freedom. There's positive freedom and negative freedom. So negative freedom is saying, yes, go get addicted to drugs. Positive freedom is saying you're not allowed to have access to drugs and you have more freedom since you're not addicted to something. And so that's positive freedom, negative freedom. American culture is complete negative freedom. We hate the concept of anyone controlling us, limiting our options, even if it would make us happier or make everything a lot better. These are also my thoughts on relationships and sex and physical boundaries and what all of that means within Christianity. So arranged marriage. So I wrote a poem about Christianity and my thoughts on it. And in the poem I said, I wish we could just go back to medieval when we wouldn't have a choice. And that can mean a lot of different things. I'm a feminist. I really care about having equal rights. I like that we have democracy. I like that we really value equality for all sorts of groups of people. But when it comes to relationships, it's not working out. The divorce rate is so high. We have complete choice in who we marry. And we're doing a horrible job. In the past, marriage was viewed as a practical thing, and it was viewed as something necessary for society to function, and it was about the family and for the children. It was a covenant. It was something you didn't just get out of when you felt like getting out of it. There's a lot of reasons for divorce, like when people are in an abusive situation, obviously get divorced, get out of the relationship. But I think that our culture is really, really focused on feelings, and we focus so much more on how we feel within a situation rather than how we're obligated to be committed to another person. I realized a few years ago I sort of dated this guy who was my best friend, and I didn't like him at all. But when I got to know him more and more and more and more on a really deep level, just because we were close friends, I started being confused about whether or not I had feelings for him. And what I realized about the whole situation is that when you get to know someone on such a deep level, you can fall in love with anyone. You will love anyone when you know them on such a deep level. And so I think that with arranged marriages, when you're told this is the person you're gonna stay committed to your whole life, it's something that you're less likely to just get out of and run away from, because you see it as, my obligation is to love this person and value them and place them first and take care of them. It's not about, oh, I want to be with this person and I love how this relationship is, how it feels. Instead, it's you have to stay married to the person. Like I said before, where it's positive and negative freedom, I think we have this negative freedom and we think that's so good, but I think that the divorce rate is so high and that's so extremely damaging to children in situations like that. And I wish that there was a way where that never ever had to happen, and where we valued marriage and family as a covenant, as a commitment, not as something that is temporary or comfortable, but as something that we stay in. And I think even outside of divorce, breakups are also, there's so much brokenness. I was in a relationship for less than a year. I didn't even know this guy for a full year. I made a whole video on healing from a breakup. Go watch it if you're going through that. But my experience is that we were not intended, God didn't create us to get so emotionally, spiritually close to someone and then break up and leave and not have them in our life again. That wasn't the intention. And so now a lot of Christians, we're not going to be physical in a relationship, but we're going to be just as emotionally and spiritually naked. And Like I said, I don't think we should go back to courtship, but I think there was a lot of good in that. When you were getting really, really emotionally, spiritually close to someone, it was because they were gonna be in your life forever. For the rest of your life, you were gonna be together. Now, we open up so much to people and then we break up, and it's extremely hurtful, and it wasn't intended to be like that. With marriage, he intended it to be one person who you get to know really, really deeply on an emotional, spiritual, physical, intellectual level, and you stay with that one person. And I think we could all agree that that would be so much better than the alternative of getting to know someone and breaking up and just having all of that pain. I also just see people being so obsessed with relationships. From middle school onward, people are like, oh, I need to find the person I'm gonna be with forever. And people just obsess over this and spend so much energy and time worrying about it, and they become insecure because of not having a relationship or because of an unhealthy relationship. I think that we're rushing into things when we're so young, and if there were arranged marriages, it wouldn't be anything you were ever worrying about. And I kind of see myself that way, where I'm not ever really worrying about being in a relationship. I've never been like that. Maybe we all just need to stop worrying about being in a relationship. One thing my campus minister from college, he told me that in a relationship, think of a healthy relationship as a table, and there's the 4 chairs of the table. And there's emotional, spiritual, physical, intellectual, and they're all supposed to be equal in the relationship. And I think we've gotten to a point now where we'll get as emotionally and spiritually close as possible to someone, but then not as physically close. And so the table is unbalanced. And so there's a lot of Christians now who are saying, why do we have to wait to have sex until we're married? It doesn't make sense. And the reason it doesn't make sense anymore is because relationship culture has completely changed away from what it was intended to be. And I think it had to change because we have this individualistic negative freedom culture now, and it would have just been impossible for arranged marriages to prevail within that environment. But that doesn't mean that we need to change our view on what sex is and completely abandon that teaching. I think that teaching is a beautiful thing, and starting in Genesis, God uses marriage and sex as a metaphor to God's relationship with people all throughout the Bible, and even in the way God speaks of the church. In the very beginning in Genesis, I believe this is an allegory, but there's still obviously truth there. When Adam and Eve knew each other, when they had sex, they knew each other. That same concept of vulnerability and knowing being known is how God relates to us as his people. Our relationship with God that he created through the new covenant at the Last Supper, that's a covenant, in that if one person messes up their side of the covenant, the other person stays inside the covenant. Contracts, if one person breaks the terms, the contract gets broken. A covenant, it keeps going even if one person breaks their part of the covenant. And so marriage is the only other covenant in our society, and I think it's this amazing, beautiful thing, and we've diluted the meaning of it by taking sex out of it, by having what looks like a marriage, but not officially making it a covenant and committing. But it's so weird because now we've gotten to a point where marriage has kind of lost its meaning, where people are living as though they are married. They have the physical, emotional, spiritual vulnerability as if they are married, and now people even have kids before they officially get married. So we're not having the commitment involved, but we're having everything else that is what in the past would have been called a marriage relationship. So it's really, really interesting and bizarre what's been happening in our society. And so I think because of that, the way people are thinking of sex is changing, because people are not valuing marriage and the label of the commitment as much anymore. But in the Bible, it's really clear that sex is marriage, that you're married to someone when you have sex. I just think that it is more beautiful and meaningful and these like amazing spiritual metaphors when we tie up sex, marriage all together. I think that is so cool. And so I think we should be encouraging that because it's more meaningful and more in alignment with what God intended for humans. If it's true that God created all people, then he created our souls and he knows what we need to flourish. And so of course we should follow God's law on certain things, even if at first it doesn't make sense, because God knows so much more about humans and what we need to fully flourish than we do. I also wanted to say that I don't have a ton of judgment, or really any judgment at all, towards people who are having sex outside of marriage. I don't care. Our country is pluralistic and secular, and so if people are in a consenting relationship, they both want to have sex, and they're using birth control or contraception, so they're not putting themselves in a situation where they're wanting to get an abortion, as long as they're doing all of that, I don't care. No one's getting hurt. I don't have a problem with that. I think that within Christian circles, there's this tendency to blow up what sex is. I don't think sex is that big of a deal. I think that the reason Christianity makes it into such a big deal is because our culture is obsessed with sex over-sexualized. We play it up to be the best thing ever, and obviously I've never had sex, so I cannot speak on it not being like the most epic thing ever. But from people I know who are married, who have, you know, through the years in churches talked about this, I really think that our culture has made sex into more than it is. And so as a way to kind of control the population, the church has presented sex before marriage as like the biggest sin ever. You're going to hell if you have sex and you're not married. And they made it into a much bigger sin than it actually is. In the past, I always blamed Catholicism for this. I always blamed Augustine and Catholicism for the longest time, and now I have so many new Catholic viewers and you're explaining things to me, so I don't want to blame your entire church for this, but the message I just got, which caused me to film this video, was from a Catholic who used the terminology going to hell in regards to having sex outside of marriage. Don't know where that's coming from, but as I said in my video, 5 lies we believe about the Bible, it's going to be linked below as well. I talked about how commands should never be presented as a negative thing, but a positive thing. And so we shouldn't be saying, don't do this or you're going to hell. Anytime that essence is ever in the church, it pushes people away, it's alienating, and people are not excited to follow God's commands. Psalm 119 is my favorite psalm. It's really long. Go read it. And it's like this enthusiasm and excitement about following the law. And in America, we view laws as a negative thing because we're all negative freedom. And so we don't like being constricted. And so we just should stop thinking of sin in legal terminology. The definition of sin is missing the mark. So even if someone is sinning by having sex outside of marriage, it's not a big deal. You're missing the mark. Personally, like I said, if someone is in a consenting relationship and they love each other and they're having sex in the relationship, yeah, I think that's missing the mark. I don't think that's the intention of what relationships were supposed to be, but I think we don't really value marriage anymore in our society. So essentially, they're acting like they're married. And so I think that's beautiful. I really do. I don't think it's exactly what was intended, but I think it's beautiful. What I consider a much bigger problem than that is when people don't know how to apologize and take accountability for their actions, or when people invalidate other people's emotions and make them feel crazy for feeling strongly. Invalidating as a form of emotional abuse is much more harmful to everyone than people consensually having sex. So I just think we've blown it way out of proportion for how bad of a sin it is. I don't know who did that. I don't know where that came from, why that happened, but I know that my generation is almost rebelling against that because it seems it's kind of ridiculous to look at a relationship. People have been together for 2 or 3 years and they're best friends and they're dating, they're in a relationship and they're having sex. Saying that is so awful, sinful, you're going to hell, you're going to be punished for that, seems ridiculous. And I think that it is ridiculous to be having that much intensity and passion. Like I said, I don't think it's God's intention, but I don't think we should be blowing it up into a bigger deal than it actually is. I don't think that will cause anyone to want to follow God's law. But what I also don't like is when people who are Christians make it into this big deal that if you have sex before you're married, you're going to feel so hurt and you're losing a part of yourself. I think that can become very sexist. We focus a lot more on the female not being sexually promiscuous and staying a virgin than the male. I think that is wrong. I think that we've gotten to a point now where men and women can have sex outside of marriage in their relationship, but it's not something that will necessarily hurt them. I think that it's kind of a myth that all females, when they have sex, will feel like they lost a part of them and feel so broken and hurt after they break up. But that's not true for all women at all. There are so many people who have sex in a relationship, but it's a good and a beautiful thing, and it's not something that they regret, and it's really meaningful in the way it was intended to be meaningful. Yeah, I don't think it was the exact intention of sex, but I think it's getting pretty close. So those are just some of my random thoughts on arranged marriages and relationships. Comment below, let me know what you think. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!